So Q plus, that's also a topic brought up in the Trump time travel series. So first, I believe that the man that God gifted with knowing how to harness torsion field energy, which is 369, for time travel, would have used his discovery for the benefit of humanity. And that man, of course, is Nikola Tesla. And though that one version of Tesla was allowed to die in our timeline, I believe he'd already gone back in time and brought back a younger version of himself that would live on into our current time period. This means that the White Hats have full use of Tesla's time travel technology under his supervision. And when I say White Hats, I'm speaking specifically of both the 17 team and the top military intelligence personnel that one is always calling the guys in Cheyenne Mountain. All right, so let's skip right into the Q plus theory presented in my Trump time travel series. The theory was born from being shown multiple older versions of President Trump. First, right in the 8chan post, and then by Trump himself using his Twitter banner. Then also American Prophet Channel was airing these pictures of an older Trump. And Dan Scavino has also included at least one in his tweets. So 3 of these older versions of Trump are shown in my Trump time travel series. They're featured in there. Like here's this picture of him, here's this picture of him, here's this picture of him, each one. But a 4th has been spotted this year, again, thanks to American Prophet Channel. And he was sitting directly behind Trump at an event that Trump was speaking at. So there are, in my opinion, there are 4 different versions of what I call Q plus. And let's say that each of these versions is known internally as Q plus number 1, Q plus number 2, Q plus number 3, etc. All right, so how could the White Hats benefit from using Trump as a time traveler? Now, Juan has told us that the 17 team's location is Cheyenne Mountain. And I believe this is where Nikola Tesla is. And that he's
told us that. Okay.
Yeah. He's been running the time travel operations from this Cheyenne Mountain base.
Wow.
Here's how it could work. At an appointed time, after Trump was fully read in on everything going on, he was sent 1 day into the past to retrieve Q plus number 1. Is that clear? He's basically getting himself from yesterday, and then and he becomes Q plus number 1. They bring him into our timeline. All right?
Huh.
That makes sense?
So he just goes back 1 day in time.
Right, because that person, that version of Trump would have been read in on everything. They don't have to brief him. They can send him immediately for his mission.
Okay.
Right?
And why is it just 1 day?
Because, like I said, you don't want to go far back because he needs to know everything that Trump knows.
Okay. So basically he's duplicating himself by going back 1 day.
Right.
Okay.
So Q plus number 1 was then sent 1 day into the future.
Huh.
And that puts him into an ever so slightly different timeline. However, the intel he has is still completely relevant, because if you know anything about John Titor, he came from 2036 into our timeline, and it was like 1% off from his, and that was enough to where everything that he knew would still be in place. Like it was still his grandfather that was involved in helping design the 5100 computer that he came to get. His parents still lived at the same place.
Yeah.
So 1% is not enough to whack things out. You could still be intel that you had could still be completely relevant in that much of a shift. All right. So they took him from the day before, Q plus number one. They sent him one day into the future.
Which gives him obviously a slight edge.
Right. Well, what it does is it keeps him out of this timeline so that he's not, because they're going to do this more than once. They need each of these ones to be in their own separate timeline.
Yeah. So he's protected, but he's totally relevant as well.
Right. Okay. So Q plus number one would then lived out 25 years in that slightly different future timeline to gather intel. He lived 25 years into the future to gather intel. He lived inside Cheyenne Mountain. He wasn't out and about being a real estate mogul. He was Trump with all the knowledge that Trump has, but he was living inside in Cheyenne Mountain because his assignment was to become a subject matter expert on one topic. So whatever that topic was, as he lived out his 25 years inside Cheyenne Mountain, top military intelligence were feeding him information on that one subject. Is that clear?
Yes. And so what do you believe the one subject was?
Well, it could be different things. Like one might have the subject of military strategies, including Space Force operations. Another one might have political strategies, based on the environment as it changes and shifts.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now, if you're up to speed, if you've been watching my channel at all and you're up to speed on how time travel works, you understand that no matter how long the traveler is gone, they've only been gone for 1 second in the timeline they left from.
Yeah.
So when Q plus number one's 25 years were up, he was sent back to our timeline. And when he returned to Cheyenne Mountain 1 second later, he was placed under strict white hat protection and began showing up at various Trump events where he could easily be seen by those with eyes to see. And the first place he was seen was with the QAnon baby. Trump went on and on and on about, look at that beautiful baby. And when you look right past that baby, you're going to see Q plus number one right in the front row, and two, I call them Secret Service agents, but whatever they are, they're his protectors, right on either side of him. And that was our first sighting of a Q plus, and it was right in the 8chan post.
Wow.
With the baby up front and him in the back, him in the background. So at this point, I've been able to spot 4 versions of the older Q plus who are back from the future, which means the same procedure I just described has been used at least 3 more times since the first one I was talking about, the QAnon baby one. So perhaps Q plus came back as an expert on military strategies. Q plus number 2 came back as an expert on political strategies. Q plus number 3 came back as an expert on financial strategies, things like this. And when they came back a second later, they gave their information directly to the 17 team there inside Cheyenne Mountain 1 second after being sent into the future. So now it makes sense how the 17 posts were always 5 steps ahead and were able to say future proves past.
Wow. That's incredible, Jetson.
Okay. So also, one more thing. Most will agree that there's at least one extra current version of Trump who appears to be coexisting alongside him in our timeline. And
Yes.
that was done the same way, only they just allowed him to stay here in this timeline. And I say that because I want to make it very clear that there are no clones of our president. No clones were made of our president. That type of activity is not condoned by our Creator. And the White Hat team does everything according to the rule of law and God's law.
the previous administration, they said, oh, you can't bring back manufacturing jobs. Really? You can't bring back. That was wrong. Remember they said you'd need a magic wand. Well, I guess we have, right? We have a magic wand.
In the mid-1920s, Donald Trump's uncle, John G. Trump, and Nikola Tesla were contemporaries, living within a few miles of each other in New York City.
I became aware of this fact while performing the research for my Tesla New Yorker hotel theory, where I proposed that John G. Trump and Nikola Tesla were the masterminds behind the New Yorker hotel's design.
Then, while doing research for this update, it was pleasing to discover that the History Channel has produced an investigative series on Tesla that concludes with a theory that he was indeed involved in the design of the hotel.
Though there's much more to the story than uncovering the truth of Tesla's involvement, this video will remove all doubts on the topic by combining empirical evidence with logical thinking.
Is time travel a real science?
Absolutely, but its secrets are divinely protected.
Those secrets were discovered by Nikola Tesla when he inadvertently placed himself between two transformers arcing at 90-degree angles in his lab.
Nikola was momentarily gifted with the ability to see the past, present, and future simultaneously. Then, in one blinding flash, he received the blueprints to build technology that would ensure the continuation of the human race.
In the same year Nikola patented his revolutionary Tesla coil, he proudly became a naturalized citizen of the United States. His divine encounter in the lab had shown him the future of the country he'd grown to love, and from that moment on, all of the money Tesla made from licensing his patents was funneled into executing the daunting yet noble task he'd been given.
In part one of this series, we examine the idea that there are at least 4 versions of Donald Trump back from the future, each known internally as Q+. Tesla's peek behind the curtain is what led to the development of the technology that made the Q+ project possible.
Each version of Trump left and returned to our timeline from inside the Cheyenne mountain complex, located just outside of Colorado Springs.
What did Q tell us about coincidences?
Tesla set right to work, putting the blueprints to paper, and quickly realized he'd been given a much safer, more sophisticated way to travel through time.
Then, in 1899, he abruptly left his beloved New York for a destination 2,000 miles away. Colorado would be where he would start construction on his first magnifying transmitter tower.
One of the fundamental elements of the testing phase of a scientific project is to recreate the environment the equipment will be used in.
The Cheyenne Mountain military complex would not get underway until 1961. But Tesla had seen the future and knew he'd be in Colorado Springs during a very specific period in history when his magnifying transmitter technology would be an integral component in the plan to save the world.
This is the real reason the initial testing of the magnifying transmitter had to take place in Colorado Springs.
Within months, Tesla had construction of the colossal tower well underway, including its underground components that reached depths of 120 feet. Rigorous testing of the equipment moved forward at a rapid pace.
About 9 months in, the project was defunded, with the press branding the experiment a failure. Tesla, however, recorded in his journal that he'd already completed everything he'd set out to accomplish, and with great success.
When Tesla returned to New York, he was ready to build his next magnifying transmitter. It became known as Wardenclyffe Tower.
The next series of tests and experiments required that he and his tower be in New York. A radioactive material called actinium would be necessary, and the easiest way to get it was from his friend and partner, John G. Trump.
John G. had access to actinium through MIT's Cancer Research Lab, where he was designing cancer therapy technology.
Part 3 will have more on this topic.
Tesla was now ready to design the most technologically advanced hotel in the world.
Consider these little-known facts about the New Yorker hotel.
When completed in 1930, the New Yorker was the first hotel ever built with its own power plant.
But it wasn't just any power plant. It was the largest private power plant in the United States.
But even more interesting is that on its biggest load days, the hotel's vast array of services, facilities, kitchens, elevators, its own telephone switchboard, and its own radio station used only 850 kilowatts of the plant's power.
And yet the plant was capable of generating 2,575 kilowatts of power.
In fact, the New Yorker's power plant was capable of producing enough energy to power a city of 35,000.
Obviously, the first consideration when planning the hotel's construction was the design of its 200,000 square foot underground plant that descended 78 feet into the earth.
The plant housed 4 locomotive-sized steam engines that drove 200 direct current motors and a number of electrical generators.
There was 1 diesel engine, 1 massive DC generator, and a coal-burning boiler room.
The entire installation was controlled from row after row of 7-foot-high switch panels that spanned a distance of 60 feet.
But wait, this is describing a DC power plant. Tesla was known for inventing alternating current. So would he have designed a direct current power plant for his hotel?
Yes, because Tesla had learned from his time in Colorado that the nearby power stations were getting knocked offline during his experiments. This informed him that municipal sources of energy simply could neither supply nor sustain the power levels he required. Thus, the hotel's plant had to be off-grid, private, and self-sufficient. Now, how many architects in the 1920s do you think knew how to design a major power plant inside a commercial skyscraper?
The fact is, the number of knowledgeable, experienced power plant designers in 1927 New York could be counted on one hand.
We do, of course, know a bit about one of them. Nikola Tesla, throughout his career as an inventor, designed and built many research and parts production labs. A major reason for this is that his competitors kept burning them down. But each lab required its own supplemental source of power, which gave Nikola extra experience designing and building private, on-site coal plants to power these labs.
Far beyond the scope of these personal projects, Nikola's knowledge and skills were pushed to the limit when he was commissioned to design the first AC power plant using his own invention, the AC generator, to light the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The project was a true marvel of engineering that provided 100,000 spectators with the most brilliant display of electrical lighting ever witnessed at that time.
This major success led to Nikola winning the bid to design the world's first major hydroelectric power plant, along with its gigantic turbine engines and generators at Niagara Falls. The plant eventually provided power for much of New York and literally ushered in the electrification of the world. This evidence alone is compelling enough to answer the question of who designed the New Yorker's underground power plant. But there's also ample evidence to show that the entire building was his design.
When the New Yorker Hotel opened on January 2nd, 1930, each of the hotel's 2,500 rooms was equipped with its own radio because the hotel had its own radio station, broadcasting live entertainment from the hotel's ballrooms and dining halls and informing guests about the hotel's upcoming attractions and activities.
Wouldn't the inventor of radio think it was a cool idea to build a hotel with its own in-house radio station? Especially after having his radio patent stolen by deep state snake Marconi. Of course, having a valid excuse for adding a few tall antennas to the top of the hotel could be helpful as well.
Another unique feature of the New Yorker Hotel was its UV light protecto ray sanitization services for its bathrooms.
Did you know that a large number of Tesla's inventions were born from his keen interest in experimenting with light in all its forms? For example, Tesla is the inventor of fluorescent tube lighting, neon tube lighting, X-ray tubes, and a tube that harnessed ultraviolet or UV light. Evidently, his experiments revealed that UV light had the ability to sanitize, so he must have designed UV light machines for the hotel cleaning staff.
Guests would know their bathroom had been protecto-rayed because after treatment, the staff would seal the bathroom fixtures with brightly colored cellophane.
Seriously?
Protecto-ray?
What hotel designer would even know of the existence of such technology?
Only the inventor of this UV light technology would know it existed and would feel confident to offer it to thousands of hotel guests daily because he'd tested it on himself for years.
Finally, the exterior of the lower parts of the building was constructed from the same piezoelectric materials as the 3 pyramids on the Giza complex. High-quality granite with a high quartz content and high-quality limestone.
We hope by now we've removed all doubts about who designed the New Yorker Hotel. We must now ask why he designed it. That's coming up in part 3. Now that we've established a very plausible basis for who designed the New Yorker, we must also look into how it may have been financed.
Though you'd be hard-pressed to find acknowledgement of it today, Tesla's groundbreaking inventions had made him an independently wealthy man in his day.
However, much of what he was designing did not exist before he invented it, meaning he had to pour vast sums of money into building on-site factories that could produce all the parts needed for his equipment and labs where he could assemble it and test it.
So when it came time to finance the New Yorker, Tesla would require outside funding. That funding very likely came out of the budget of U.S. military intelligence.
The original cost of the New Yorker was quoted at $8 million, and the final bill was more than $22 million, which leads us to why the New Yorker was built.
The blueprints for a more sophisticated form of time travel had been given to Nikola Tesla, but he would need to experiment with his two magnifying transmitters to fully develop it. The end result of his work was the New Yorker Hotel, which in effect was a next-generation magnifying transmitter.
Nikola used this more robust technology to travel into the past, find a younger version of himself, and bring that version back with him to this timeline.
This younger version was then moved to the Cheyenne mountain complex in the early 60s, where he and our military got right to work building the device that would be generating a worldwide resonant standing sound wave, also known as the last trump, for the final phase of the plan to save the world.
This is another of the series entitled Vignettes of Early Radiation Workers, sponsored by the Bureau of Radiological Health. These consist of unrehearsed interviews with scientists working mostly in fields that impinge upon the applications of ionizing radiation to diagnostic and therapeutic radiology. From Poly, you went then to MIT to pursue your graduate work.
Yes, I did. There was an intervening 2 years. While I was instructor at Poly, I studied physics at Columbia University and got the master's degree there.
Now, when you went to MIT, I believe your original intentions, if they may be so described, was to go into electric power types of applications. Is that right?
I came there primarily to become a good designer of high-power electrical machinery. However, in the process of looking for a doctorate thesis, I selected a suitable topic in my area and went to see Vannevar Bush. Bush heard me on my problem. And then he said, "You ought to go and see Van de Graaff. He has just arrived at MIT from Princeton, and he has some wild ideas." And I abandoned the design of electric machinery and began studying the insulation of high voltages in vacuum and the acceleration of heavy particles to high energies. He was brought to MIT after producing a model which went up to 1 million volts. Actually, they were two 500,000 volt generators looking at each other. This was a huge double electrostatic generator with spheres which were 15 feet in diameter, set on a textilite pedestal 25 feet high. Two huge machines. One was to run positive and the other negative.
John G. Trump played a key role in the plan. While serving in the military, leading the development of new top-secret radar equipment, John G. Trump gained officer-level access to connections within the military intelligence community.
John G. was able to use these connections to ensure that the younger version of Nikola would be able to fulfill his role from inside the Cheyenne mountain complex. This protection was necessary both for Tesla and his technology.
When you have the big picture that the New Yorker was a more sophisticated form of time travel that allowed Nikola to traverse different timelines and interact with a younger version of himself, $22 million was a small price for our military to pay for humanity's freedom. Rapture event is a worldwide sound-based event.
Between 2017 and 2019, the lost Trump technology was being run through a series of tests.
Amazingly, publicly announced proof of these tests was provided by the 17 team.
Sound waves can easily travel through air, sea, and land. And in the proper setting, sound waves become standing waves.
Usually, anybody will come, he will be, of course, interested. Oh, look at the beautiful statues, and wouldn't realize the important part here, resonance.
The reflected sound wave reinforces itself. It gains power almost like a feedback loop. And it's quite an experience to be in the room and to do this. When the standing wave effect happens, you kind of lose all directionality for the sound. It seems like it's coming from everywhere. And you can feel your chest cavity just vibrate like a heavy bass line at a concert. It's frankly amazing.
As this clip illustrates, standing waves become resonant in the right setting.
And these standing waves can have surprising effects on a human body.
To further illustrate the magnitude of resonance that can be generated by standing waves, watch what happens inside this small enclosure when this man remains physically connected to the source of the resonance being emitted by the ringing of this bell. Speaking of resonance, what is this Schumann resonance we've heard so much about?
The Schumann resonance is a low amplitude, naturally occurring standing wave that is constantly bouncing between the Earth and the ionosphere. It's often referred to as Earth's heartbeat.
What if Nikola developed technology that can raise the amplitude of this resonance?
These two stunning Schumann resonance charts from 2019 demonstrate that technology can indeed be used to dramatically affect the magnitude of these standing waves, and with astonishing precision. Take a good look at these two charts, exactly 1 month apart from 2019.
There's yet another way the Schumann resonance is being technologically manipulated, and this data is being made publicly available through this website in Siberia.
By monitoring the daily report released by this site, I discovered that the normal base amplitude of the Schumann has been rising steadily since at least 2017.
So why would Tesla want to raise the rate of Earth's heartbeat? What if those being rescued out of this matrix are having their bodies prepared for the physical changes associated with the Rapture event?
That brings us to this publicly announced test of the last Trump technology, and that is the Mayotte ping. Over the past 7 years, I was given visions accompanied by the physical sensation of two sound waves meeting with a boom at a right angle.
When you consider that 70% of Earth's surface is water, and that sound waves travel faster through water than through air, it's only logical that Tesla would make use of both air and sea to maximize the effect of his last Trump technology.
Further, to achieve the 90-degree angle needed for the meeting of the two waves, each wave would have to be emanating from a source that was completely removed from proximity of the other. This could most easily be achieved by transmitting one wave through the air and one from beneath the ocean.
John G. Trump was known to have led a military team in the development of advanced radar technology.
What if he and Nicola used what was learned from that project to develop a form of radar that could be used to control isochronal sounding waves sent around the realm like a loopback ping from a base station at the bottom of the ocean?
Go to Judson White on YouTube. This is a military intelligence channel on YouTube. Look up a video called The Last Trump Technology. It starts with Corinthians 1:25. That's a fun verse to read. Anyway, kind of fun to look at. You'll learn things about the Schumann resonance, and there's an island off the southeast coast of Africa that our U.S. Navy has been guarding for a very long time. And what's taking place under that island.
In part 4, we explained how Tesla's last Trump technology will cause a majority of Earth's population to become temporarily invisible by generating a resonant sound wave long and loud enough to be heard worldwide.
But Tesla's tech has one more role to play in the Rapture event, and that is to transform these invisible bodies into human superconductors. In mid-2018, I began receiving information about time travel. At the same time, however, I was presented with a most preposterous idea that the Rapture event would be augmented with technology, and that those leaving would not be the saints, but rather those who were vibrating in a mid-frequency range. I was also shown that these 7 billion mid-frequency humans would be stargated to a new beginning timeline, which of course involves time travel. And so everything was connected. Also, along the way, I received a rather odd term, which was 5D ion avalanche. Of course, I'd never heard of such a thing, and was of the belief it would be a one-time event created exclusively for the Rapture event. That's when I was alerted to this event in Queens that happened on December 27th, 2018. I learned its military code name was Operation Blue Skies, and I was provided with diagrams of how it was implemented. By comparing the diagrams with the event, I understood that this was the technology for the 5D ion avalanche, and the op was the public testing of it.
The effects of this test generated a phenomenon so widespread and highly noticeable that mainstream media had to rush to cover it up. The AIM concept relies on the formation of regions of plasma of sufficient density to reflect waves back to Earth.
Amazingly, while researching the AIM technology for this series update, I actually discovered for the first time that this technology produces an effect called Avalanche Ionization. As they say, you cannot make this stuff up.
So why would 7 billion human bodies need to have superconductive properties during the Rapture event? Let's look at these properties, all of which are 5D in nature. Levitation, zero resistance, quantum locking. Quantum locking is the ability to be suspended and locked into position in space. This superconductive state will facilitate the loading of 7 billion humans into thousands of fleets in a controlled, orderly, and precise fashion.
Just as Noah required a hand of God moment to load his ark, it's the same for the loading of the 7 billion. The hand of God will intervene in the twinkling of an eye and load the crafts that are here for them.
Reference to the public testing of this avalanche ionization tech is also found in the 17 team posts, which foretold the op 8 months in advance using the descriptive code name Sky Event. The Operation Blue Skies test allowed Tesla to measure the reach and magnitude of one ion avalanche and thus reliably calculate how many reflectors will need to be generated worldwide for the Rapture event.
More to come on this in Part 6. In Section 1 of the Trump Time Travel Series 2024 update, we've identified the technology that will be used in support of the Rapture event and presented the public testing of that technology.
In parts 4 and 5, we explained how resonant sound wave technology will be used to render those in the mid-frequency range invisible, and how ion beams will be used to transform those temporarily invisible bodies into superconductors.
As explained, a 5D ion avalanche will be created by injecting an accelerated ion beam into the upper atmosphere to form an arc reflector made of dense plasma.
The equipment required to create these reflectors is the final addition to our list of last Trump technology. The results of the 2018 Operation Blue Skies test demonstrated the reach and magnitude of one ion avalanche, so that the number of arc reflectors needed worldwide for the Rapture event could be determined. Here in Part 6, we'll explore how a simultaneous injection of accelerated ion beams could be executed on demand, instantaneously on a worldwide scale.
Because actinium is the only element that glows in the dark with an aqua blue light, we knew heavy metal actinium beams had been used to create the avalanche ionization effect for Operation Blue Skies. And so we sought to find existing technology and equipment that specializes in producing and controlling ionized beams derived from heavy metal elements.
We also understood that only a specialized heavy ion beam accelerator can do this. So our task became to determine the number and location of these sites worldwide.
Our search took days, and it eventually became clear that only a small percentage of collider facility sites actually have a heavy ion beam accelerator.
The most well-known collider site on Earth is CERN, which happens to be one of the sites with a heavy ion beam accelerator.
The name of CERN's ion accelerator is Alice, which led me back to reread the 17 posts that mention Alice. In particular, this rather enigmatic intel drop. Q equals Alice. Q is code for the 17 team. Alice is code for ALICE. ALICE is an acronym for a Large Ion Collider Experiment. Wait a minute, is this post referring to an ion experiment? It was this post that sparked an extremely plausible idea for a worldwide source of instantaneous, simultaneous, accelerated heavy ion beams. Here's how it could work.
Based on the belief that the 17 operation is being led and implemented by top intelligent operatives within our loyal military, and knowing the grand scope of providing a worldwide source for heavy ion beams, it was an easy dot to connect that our military would have to be involved.
Especially when you understand that every aspect of the plan to save the world must go off without a hitch.
Exactly. Those leaving will only get this one chance to be rescued out of the insufferable corruption of this deeply infiltrated system. And it follows that it will take an expertly coordinated effort by a sizable team of well-trained, highly organized operatives.
In 2018, the CERN facility announced it was shutting down for 2 years for a major upgrade.
As with the 2017 to 2019 tech tests, publicly available comms were being dropped by the 17 team to confirm their involvement in CERN's 2018 shutdown. In order to receive the comm, we had to know the date of the Blue Skies op, and we had to understand the connection between Blue Skies and the CERN shutdown. When we noticed that December 10, 2018 is exactly 17 days prior to Operation Blue Skies on December 27, 2018, we knew it was a confirmation comm from the 17 team that they were indeed involved in both events. We also knew that the connection between the two events was actinium, the element used to ionize the sky. So, is there a heavy ion facility near Queens, New York, where the Operation Blue Skies test was run? In fact, there are 2 heavy ion facilities on Long Island, one in Stony Brook and one in Upton.
We took this as a solid confirmation that our idea to identify all heavy ion facilities was on track. Now, back to this seriously cryptic drop. Q equals Alice. What could be meant by stating that the 17 team is Alice?
Indeed. How could the 17 team be synonymous with a Large Ion Collider experiment?
The answer was found in the publicly reported CERN shutdown announcements. Here's the logic. If the military is covertly involved in providing heavy ion beams for the Rapture event, they would require a believable cover to take over the command of the entire CERN facility, and an upgrade shutdown met that requirement.
They would also need ample time to implement the training of specialized beam teams, and to then insert them into the employee workforce of every heavy ion accelerator facility on Earth. A 2-year time frame easily met that requirement.
The military could then use CERN's Alice facility as its command control center for a worldwide network of beam teams tasked with generating an instantaneous, simultaneous 5D ion avalanche that covers the entire Earth.
We mentioned earlier that the number of heavy ion beam accelerators is small compared to other types. This was concerning because our final tally was on the short side.
Here are all the heavy ion facilities we were able to conclusively identify.
In all, we identified only 20 facilities worldwide. After plotting their locations on a world map, a pattern emerged showing that coverage for each of the hemispheres, northern and southern, was plausible, but just barely.
Then we realized that an ion avalanche spreads out exponentially as it gains speed, just as a snow avalanche does, and the result is a heavily ionized sky. Then I remembered this quote from Tesla about his ionization experiments.
Ionization of the upper atmosphere transforms the sky into as good a conductor of electricity as a metal. In other words, when these worldwide beam teams are simultaneously activated, the coverage they achieve locally will use the sky as a conductor to rapidly expand ionization to all four corners of the Earth.
Knowing all this, we felt confident to conclude that full coverage of Earth was plausible and possible in this scenario. And this is how the 17 team can be synonymous with Alice, because they'll be orchestrating a large ion experiment.
Military beam teams are the final link in the technologically generated chain of events that will take place during the most important event in human history.
'Tis marvelously exciting to see how it could all go down. The only thing missing now is divine providence and intervention, and that's what will be covered in Section 2.